zoom out even further and like dream with us, right? Think about where the space could potentially be. You can see how much untapped space there is.
Distraction makers.
What do we think are areas that we think are good targets for innovation?
Yeah, so we have a few things listed here, but I think we'll start with game objects as being the first one, because it just coincidentally happened to be cards. Like, cards were just easy to produce. There was already companies and manufacturers creating cards, so it was easy and they're cheap. And you can store a lot of information on a card. However, we've seen games in the past that broke away from this.
Marbles is funny, actually. Before Magic, marbles were sort of a collectible object game that, boomers or somebody played. I don't know.
Pogs.
Yep. That's another good one. That's more of a millennial game. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, we have seen some innovation within the game object part of this. But back in the day, with the sort of last big TCG bubble, there were some really crazy ideas out there. A lot of them were sort of experimenting with like what you could still get out of a booster pack, right? They wanted to keep that kind of booster pack distribution model, but like, okay, well, what else can we put in a booster pack? And the one that comes to mind for me all the time is this game called Pirates, which had little plastic ships. They would come on a card, right? And then you punch them out, and then you assemble the ship. And then it's sort of a miniatures game that you assembled out of a booster pack, which was wild, like super cool.
You were showing me this, and I thought it was so crazy because it's almost infuriating because I see that and I'm like, that's so cool that I wish I had that right now.
Right.
I wish I saw something on the market like that at the moment.
It's pretty nuts. Yeah.
And I think it's funny because more recently, looking at more recent innovations, something like Keyforge, I think, was a game that questioned that distribution model. It's not that unique of components. It's still cards, but like it brought into the question, or it asked the question whether you needed to actually customize your deck or not, or is you having this very specific, unique, algorithmically constructed deck for you enough, and instead you can just focus on the game itself.
Yeah, and it kind of moved that like collectible object to being the deck in its entirety instead of just the individual cards. And so you buy a deck and it is fully like randomized, and the backs are different, so you theoretically can't mix them with other cards. People have done it anyway, but the idea was that the whole deck was the collectible object rather than individual cards. Which was interesting, and it was successful for a pretty substantial period of time.
Might still be.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
I think they're on like GameFound or
they're on GameFound,
Kickstarter and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, back to crowdfunding. Okay, so another one from back in the day was one of my favorite games to bring up as like, I don't know, a TCG hipster, I guess. I'm curious how many people have seen this game or remember this game. It was a Wizards of the Coast game called Hecatomb, which was so strange. The cards are made out of plastic. They're also
hexagons.
Pentagons?
Oh, pentagons.
I think they're pentagons, which is weird because the game's called Hecatomb, but not that it's Hexatomb. It's Hecatomb, which
they were so close to just calling it Hexatomb.
Also, Hecatomb is so weird. Like that word it's like slaughting thousands of cattle
or
something.
It's like an altar for slaughtering 100 cows or something.
It's like the most metal thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird game. The cards are made out of plastic, and they are pentagons, and you layer them on top of each other to give the abilities of the cards under them to the one that's on top.
Right.
And you're basically like summoning big monsters like Cthulhu, and it's kind of eldritch horror themed, but super cool.
There are some games that have used the same type of like clear plastic card thing.
Yeah.
The card game Gloom does this as well. It's not a trading card game, but I think that's wild. And I think because I wasn't familiar with Hecatomb until you showed me, but like that's so out there.
Yeah. Well, it solves the sleeve problem, which is interesting. Because like if you're going to make, a collectible object game that doesn't fit the mold, right? Doesn't go into the sort of like the default sleeves. Well, how do you solve it? Well, you just make the card plastic. You don't need a sleeve, right? They weren't 100% durable, but it did the job.
Right.
Ironically enough, this actually is what sunk them as well, because there was a oil crisis around that era, and it made it so the cards were way too expensive to produce. So
how do you make binders?
You don't.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think you make mine. You just put them in deck boxes, I guess.
Put them in CD cases.
They had to make you could. Yeah. You could put them in CD cases. But yeah, the deck boxes even were like pentagon shaped.
Finally, last one for game objects that I just really selfishly want to talk about is the card game Zatch Bell. For the life of me, can't remember how to play it. But the thing that I really liked about Zatch Bell back in the day is that I think it asked the question of, can you play this game without even a deck of cards? Yeah. And instead, how can you innovate with how you're accessing these cards itself? So in order to play the game, you would have a little spell book, and the spell book was like a binder, and each page of that binder had a spell on it.
It's like how you move through your hand of cards, right. But it's like your whole spell book, and you have to like move. You're like, this card lets me flip a couple pages this way and that way.
It was, so you'd have certain actions that you could take, and every action was like a turn of the page or something. And
to solve the queen problem, you just can't have the queens next to each other.
Right. There you go. And so it's like seeing stuff like that I'm like, not only, I'm sure there's lots of issues, right? So bringing all these up is not saying like, wow, where'd these games go? They were perfect. Like,
they're dead for a reason.
It's not that there aren't issues with that still. But I love the physicality of it. I love the innovation. I think it's really immersive. I think it's really, really cool. And it's surprising that we're not seeing more of that currently.
Yeah. You know what's funny is we didn't even like read it in the notes, but it makes me, I think about Beyblade. Beyblade is actually a particularly interesting collectible object game that has found the ability to customize components. They don't do boosters, which I think is interesting.
I don't know why they don't.
I'm glad they don't, because it would be difficult for them to justify in terms of like gameplay purpose. But business-wise, I think random Beyblade booster packs would be insane.
If they can push the narrative that skill expression is viable for Beyblade,
sure,
viable enough, then you just have a draft format, and instead you draft.
Oh, that's a good point.
You draft.
Draft could
and
work.
Then you let it rip. It's Beyblade. It's the slogan is let it rip. So next we have gameplay innovations.
Gameplay innovations. And a big one for this category is the WoW TCG. And not because of it's sort of the main game. There were two different ways to play the WoW TCG, and one was sort of the PvP main player versus player, you sort of Magic-esque type thing. But the other mode they had was PvE. They had raid bosses and dungeons, and they made actually quite a few of them.
Yeah, they made a lot. I was surprised.
I remember those came out, but then after that, I kind of fell off and wasn't paying attention anymore. And yeah, they came out with quite a few.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard of their dungeon decks. So the raid decks were interesting because it created that asymmetrical play where one person actually played as the raid boss, everyone else played as part of the party to try and take the raid boss out. The raid boss had like their own deck and actions and stuff. And the dungeon decks were self-played. They'd play themselves out, so no one else had to play the part of the DM, essentially.
And they were like loot packs that you got to open after you beat the boss and stuff.
It wasn't awesome. It was, I think they allowed you to do it like after you beat the boss, or if you wanted. What I thought was so cool is, you'd get the like Onyxia's Lair or whatever, and you'd get this booster pack of items, and it was all items that translated to real items that were in the MMO.
And WoW, yeah.
And it would tie with like the classes that would want them and crazy stuff, and you can put those cards in your deck as you're fighting the boss.
Yeah.
So cool.
Super cool.
And it's like infuriating that we're not seeing anything else on the market right now doing something like this.
Yeah. Shout out to Brian Kibler for his contributions.
That's right.
Lorcana has kind of picked up the torch a little bit here in that they do offer some PvE type content. It's not quite as sophisticated as what the WoW TCG was doing. You showed me the Jafar PvE Lorcana expansion, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
I don't know exactly what to call it.
A raid deck.
Raid deck, basically. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. Shows some promise. I'm glad to see some innovation in that space. So another thing alongside PvE in the sort of gameplay innovation space is solo play. I am very surprised that we have not seen a sort of a trading card game that is focused on the ability to play solo and also play PvP. I actually think this is one of Magic's secret superpowers, is that Magic, I think, functions very well as a solo game for people to goldfish. And part of we actually just came to this epiphany while we were talking about it, is that its mana system creates variance within the solo play mode of like goldfishing, where you get to like goldfish a lot, and the games that you goldfish are substantially different from one another, rather than a game that just plays out as like, well, I just play on curve every time, and then the interaction only comes up when I'm interacting with my opponent. Fascinating. I was like, duh, that's crazy.
I think it's something that most people don't think about, because it's I'm sure, we get a lot of people that watch us that, are TCG players, but there is a very large untapped market of solo players.
There's actually quite a big market for solo board games that's been emergent. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's not talked about as much. So moving away from PvE and solo play, there is still innovation in PvP. And I think talking about the game Netrunner is a really good example here, in that Netrunner kind of did something a lot different, where it had asymmetrical roles that ended up being its probably greatest strength, but also greatest weakness, unfortunately, in the long run. However, it made for really, really interesting gameplay, where one person would show up as the corporation, they'd have a corporation deck, and one person would show up as the runner.
I want to play the corporation, Dad.
Look, come
on.
But
let me put together my business plan.
Like, flavor-wise, yeah, I don't think it's most enticing.
I don't know who wants to do that versus who wants to play the hacker, right? Like, come on.
I will say I like the gameplay of the corporation, but yeah, playing a corporation, I'm not like stoked. I'm not like, I'm Walmart. Yeah, like, I'm not like psyched about that.
You could be Costco. It's a little better.
I could be Costco. Yeah. What? Let the runner right in? Actually, no. I'd have people stopping them.
$1.50 hot dogs.
Oh,
that's how you win over
$1.50 hot dogs, the Netrunner card.
That's how you win over the people.
Meta shaking Netrunner card.
$1.50 hot dogs. Hot dog and a soda. $1.50.
So,
can't beat it.
Anyways, so Netrunner was super cool because of its asymmetrical roles, a runner would play a completely different game basically to what the corporation would play, but they would be in conflict with one another. So the runner has its own goals, that is trying to infiltrate the corporation. Corporation has its own goals, that is trying to prevent the runner from stopping it from doing it. And both play completely different, but both very interesting, really, really great game. And I'm again, surprised to not see more innovation in this space. It seemed like most people maybe saw the weaknesses of having these asymmetrical roles. It made it hard for tournament play. It made it hard if, most people preferred playing runner or corporation or whatever. You needed to have someone that was willing to play one or the other. That causes some issues. So I don't know if other companies saw that and went, well, then we won't touch it, and didn't bother thinking about it.
I think there's definitely a reason why Netrunner ended up as a living card game, as it started as a TCG, but then later became a living card game. And I think that's probably a pretty big reason why, is that if you're going to require players to have sort of two decks, they need to have better access to the cards than what a TCG might allow. Right. So, but lots of room for innovation still, I think. Okay, so last category here, we're going to talk about incentives. So if we have some innovation in incentives meaning like, what are you incentivizing the players to do when playing the game? This is pretty well connected to PvP, sort of PvE stuff, but there's another layer here that can sort of be put on top of this, where something like Warhammer is like the best example I have, which is Warhammer players get rewarded for painting their armies well. They get rewarded for sort of customization in that way. And this has like tangible benefits. They have their own competitions for painting. There's extra points that get awarded at tournaments for having well-painted armies. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a sort of a holistic part of the hobby. It's not just about optimization.
Right. These incentives are usually constructed in a meta sense, like they're constructed by people that participate in the hobby. And so you end up seeing a lot of people that care a lot about a lot of different aspects of something like Magic or other TCGs. But it's never really like codified. I don't think you see a lot of companies that are doing something like what Warhammer Games Workshop did with Warhammer and saying like, this is actually part of our tournament structure.
Right. Because we do see innovation about this coming from the Commander community, but it's not systemically incentivized, right? It's really sort of like an implicit player encouraged thing that happens, but there really isn't any kind of like event incentive for doing this other than just sort of like social credit. Like people look at you as like, oh, you're a innovative deck builder or whatever, but that doesn't really have any systemically tangible benefits. In fact, it probably has tangible system detriments, probably.
Right. And I think if there's one way of like easily framing how you could innovate, I guess, in the incentive space, most of the time you're incentivized to basically min-max, right? You're incentivized to go and be as optimal as possible to try and take out your opponent. And so if there's other things that you can do to incentivize suboptimal play, that's probably where you're going to be seeing some innovation. And so another good example of this that we've kind of talked about in past videos is like incentivizing role play. Right. Incentivizing why actually, instead of you playing most optimally, it's playing most flavorfully. And that's something that like you see, there's a lot of tabletop RPGs that try to incentivize this with their systems, of like someone that ended up acting the best or performing the best or playing most like their character or something, get these other tangible benefits.
It is interesting to think about. Yeah, because in D&D they have the what's it called? The hero points, or there's
inspiration dice.
Inspiration, yeah, where they can, like, the DM can award those things to players that they think had a cool moment or something. And I'm wondering if there could be some incentive for innovation in this area in terms of like maybe it's a co-op game, or like some players can award each other things for whatever reason. It's pretty interesting. All right, well, takeaways. I think it is interesting too, because we had our video about Riftbound, and we got some feedback in the comments. It was just basically saying like, well, why do you keep comparing this to Magic? They're two totally different games. And I'm like, well, look, we've been around a long time. Like, we've seen a lot of games. Riftbound is different, but it's not nearly as substantially different as some of these other games that we've seen in the past. And so it's not that that's to say that like Riftbound is a bad game or anything. It's just to say that like when we zoom out far enough, the way that Riftbound is sort of compared to Magic and the way that it's solving a lot of the problems, it's solving them in a lot of very similar ways.
I think if you're strictly looking at trading card games as a genre, based off of what the current market's offerings are of trading card games, it's easy for people that are really heavily invested in that specific genre to see the differences and see that as a big change. But I think if you were to zoom out and you look at the totality of the space and zoom out even further and like dream with us, right? Think about where the space could potentially be. You can see how much untapped space there is. And so that's why it oftentimes can feel like, we have this craving or this desire to see these other types of gameplay that aren't currently being tapped into.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I remember, this is just a bit offhand, but I went into a comic shop I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever, and I was just sort of blown away by the diversity of all of the different things, like just different indie comics that were there. And I was like, this is such a diverse, inspiring place to be, like seeing all these different comics, and it made me feel like, wow, I wish like the barrier to getting into sort of like card games in that way could be low enough that we could get that kind of diversity.
And I think we're getting there.
I think it is. I mean, really, it might not be a TCG, but that's fine, right? Like a deck of cards or whatever, made by indie creators or small teams. I think it's much more doable now, especially to find an audience of people that would be interested in that kind of thing. So we plan on doing our part in trying to help that happen, but we're not quite sure what that looks like just yet. But
I think that's something we didn't even touch on, is that like it doesn't even have to be innovating in a TCG space, right? Like it's, if you're asking the question whether these cards need to be collected or not, maybe they don't, and maybe it is a living card game, and maybe that's where you end up going and investing your time, because I think that the barrier to entry has become significantly lower over these years, and yet the diversity in products has lessened.
Yeah, we're gonna, it's just waiting for the Labubu secret layer.
Hell yeah, brother.
It's coming.
Ooh, can't wait. If you enjoyed listening to us talk about good stuff, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
If you want to continue the conversation, you can join our Discord. The link is in the description. As always, I didn't forget.
Well, then why do you...
Thanks for watching.
Got back in the groove.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.